The calm before the storm. Emily woke up to the soft, melodic sound of waves crashing against the shore, a peaceful reminder that she was no longer just a woman with dreams of a perfect wedding, but now, the bride of the man she had loved and admired for the past 2 years. She blinked into the early morning light streaming through the sheer curtains of the suite, the soft golden hues filling the room with a warmth that made her smile. The bed around her felt like a cocoon, and for a brief moment, she closed her eyes and savored the quiet, lingering beauty of the morning. The world outside was still, the only sound being the rhythmic ebb and flow of the ocean and the occasional rustling of the wind. A soft breeze blew in through the open window, carrying with it the faint scent of salt water and tropical flowers, the fragrance mingling with the lingering notes of the celebration they had just shared. The wedding, the night she had dreamed of her whole life, was over. And though it had been everything she had hoped for, a grand, unforgettable affair, she couldn't help but feel a sense of surreal calm now that it was behind her. She was married to Jason. Her heart swelled as she thought of him. He was everything she had ever wanted in a partner: smart, driven, kind, and above all, deeply loving. They had met at a charity gala 2 years ago, and from the moment their eyes met, she knew he was someone special. Jason had swept her off her feet with his effortless charm, his genuine humility, and the way he listened to her every word. In a sea of successful, powerful men, he had stood out as a man of substance, someone who could balance ambition with compassion. She stretched slowly in the bed, feeling the soft sheets slide across her skin. She had been exhausted after the wedding festivities, but she woke feeling refreshed, like a new chapter had just begun in her life, one she could share with the man who had already transformed it in so many beautiful ways. She glanced at the window and saw the golden light spilling over the vast expanse of the beach below. The view was breathtaking. The waves lapped gently at the shore, and a few palm trees swayed with the breeze, casting shadows over the sand. It was as if the world had paused, frozen in time, just for her. The wedding night had come to an end. And now, as she sat there on the edge of the bed, the excitement of the day ahead, her first full day as Jason's wife, settled deep within her. Her heart fluttered with anticipation, eager to embrace the future, to take on whatever came next with him by her side. The sun seemed to shine brighter now, almost as though it knew the specialness of the moment. But as Emily turned to the other side of the bed, her eyes went to the empty space beside her. Jason's side was untouched. The sheets were still smooth, the pillow neatly arranged, as if he hadn't even laid down. She raised an eyebrow, a small wrinkle of confusion furrowing her brow. Where was he? Jason had always been an early riser. His routine was almost as consistent as his charm. He was the type of man who thrived on structure and discipline. From the first morning they spent together, he had always woken up before her, ready to tackle the day with boundless energy. She smiled to herself, imagining him already out on the balcony, perhaps enjoying a morning coffee or looking over plans for the small beach ceremony they were having that afternoon. He always had something planned ahead, always made sure everything was perfect. That was Jason. As Emily's mind wandered, she noticed a tray of breakfast sitting on a glass table by the window, its simple elegance a stark contrast to the morning stillness. There was fresh fruit, neatly arranged on a small plate, a couple of slices of perfectly toasted bread, and a steaming cup of coffee, exactly how she liked it, dark and strong, no sugar. It was a thoughtful touch, one she had come to expect from him. Alongside the tray there was a small handwritten note, folded neatly under the handle of the coffee cup. Her heart fluttered as she read the note aloud, a gentle smile curving her lips. "Morning beautiful, I'll let you sleep in today. I'll be at the beach when you're ready. Love, Jay." It was exactly the kind of sweet, thoughtful thing Jason would do. His ability to anticipate her needs without her even having to express them was one of the reasons she fell for him so quickly. He was never the type to demand attention, but rather, he gave it in spades without even thinking. Jason had a way of making her feel seen, appreciated, something she hadn't even realized she'd needed before meeting him. After a few moments of simply enjoying the warmth of the morning and the serene ambience, Emily climbed out of bed, her bare feet sinking into the plush carpet beneath her. She moved toward the large glass window, pulling it open just enough to let in the fresh, salty air. The view stretched out in front of her like something out of a dream. Endless blue ocean, gentle waves, and white sands that seemed to stretch forever. The beach, where, in just a few hours, she would say "I do" once again, in a private ceremony that would be simple yet incredibly meaningful. It was everything she had wanted. Just her and Jason, the people closest to their hearts, surrounded by the peace of nature. The thought of that filled her heart with a warmth that made her pause for a moment, taking it all in. Her thoughts wandered back to their whirlwind romance. 2 years ago, they had met at a charity gala in New York. Jason had been effortlessly charming, commanding the room without even trying. He had struck up a conversation with her, completely unpretentious, and from that moment on, there was no looking back. It wasn't just his intelligence or ambition that drew her in, it was his humility. Jason had an ease about him, a balance between being successful and down to earth that had instantly put her at ease. She had always thought of him as the perfect man, someone who had everything: success, confidence, kindness, and a willingness to share it all. Everything about their relationship had felt like destiny. It had been fast, yes, but it had always felt right. Their connection was undeniable. But as she stood there by the window, gazing at the horizon, something inside her stirred. The fluttering in her chest wasn't just excitement anymore. There was a slight unease, a sense of unease she couldn't quite explain, a feeling she had been trying to push aside, but it lingered like an unspoken word on the tip of her tongue. She took a deep breath, trying to shake it off. Maybe it was just the pre-wedding jitters. After all, it wasn't just any ordinary day. It was her wedding day. And the significance of it all, what it meant, the weight of the promises they had made to one another, could be enough to cause anyone to feel a little nervous. But Emily pushed it aside, trying to focus on the joy of the moment. After a few more minutes of simply enjoying the morning, she decided to freshen up. Her hands moved mechanically, brushing her hair and applying a little makeup, though she didn't need much. As she worked, her eyes occasionally drifted back to the note Jason had left behind. His simple words of affection that always made her heart swell. She had never felt more loved, more at ease with someone, than she did with him. The bathroom mirror reflected her carefully composed face as she finished getting ready. It was strange, she thought. Everything was so perfect. Too perfect, maybe. The nerves began to flare up again, but she dismissed them as nothing more than pre-wedding excitement. Once ready, Emily grabbed her phone from the nightstand, ready to message Jason and tell him she was coming to join him. But as she looked down, she noticed there were no messages, no notifications. That was odd. Jason was usually the one who kept in touch. It was unlike him to not send a good morning message or check in. Maybe he was busy getting things set up for the ceremony. She pushed the thought aside as she left the suite, walking out onto the private balcony that overlooked the beach. The warm morning sun kissed her skin, the gentle breeze lifting her hair as she moved down the steps toward the soft sand below. But as she approached the water's edge, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Jason was standing by the water, his back to her. And something was wrong. The way he stood, rigid and still, was unlike him. He was always full of energy, always so confident and lively. The absence of movement, the stillness of his figure, sent a chill down her spine. "Jay?" Emily called softly, her voice tentative, unsure. Jason didn't respond. Her heart quickened, her steps now unsure as she approached him. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. A gnawing sense of dread crept up her spine. "Jay?" She called again, louder this time. But still, there was no response. She reached out, her hand trembling as she gently placed it on his shoulder, the touch delicate, almost as if she were afraid of disturbing something fragile. But the moment her fingers made contact, Jason froze. And then, slowly, he turned to face her. What she saw made her blood run cold. It wasn't just his face, his eyes, which were hollow and distant, his lips set in a rigid line. It was his back. The back she had known so well, the back that had always been smooth, strong, and comforting. Now it was marked. Scars. Deep, jagged, uneven scars. And in that moment, Emily realized that the man she had married was not the man she thought he was. The unraveling truth. The world seemed to freeze as Emily stood there, her hand still lingering on Jason's shoulder, unable to move. Her mind struggled to make sense of what she was seeing, the shocking sight of his back, those deep, jagged scars, burning into her memory in an instant. A wave of confusion and disbelief washed over her, each second stretching into eternity. Jason's body was turned towards her now, but the shock in his eyes seemed distant, as if he had retreated into himself, hidden behind a wall of silence. "Jay," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, shaky and unsteady. What happened to you?" Jason's eyes flickered for a moment, but he didn't respond right away. He just stood there, his face unreadable, as though he had retreated into some place she couldn't follow. The deep breath he took only seemed to make the tension between them even more palpable. His silence was unbearable, and Emily's heart began to pound in her chest, every beat thudding louder, urging him to speak. She slowly pulled her hand away, but her gaze remained fixed on his back. It was as if the scars told a story, one that she was not prepared to hear, one that she had never imagined. "Why won't you tell me what happened?" Emily's voice cracked, and she reached out again, this time her fingers trembling, not in anger, but fear. Fear of what she might hear. Fear of what she might find out. Jason finally spoke, his voice low and strained, as if each word required an immense effort. "It's not something I want you to know, Emily. It's not something I should have let you see." His tone was heavy with regret, and the weight of his words made Emily's heart sink. It was clear now. Whatever the truth was, it was something he had been hiding for a long time. Something that, in his mind, should never have come to light. Emily stepped back, trying to regain some semblance of composure, though the tremor in her hands betrayed her. She couldn't help but glance at the scars again, each one marking his skin like an invisible weight. "You're telling me you've been hiding this from me? For how long, Jason?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, barely able to process what she was hearing. Jason's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, it seemed as though he was debating whether to say more. The silence between them stretched unbearably, suffocating any remnants of the joy she had felt just moments before. She had known Jason as a man of transparency, of strength, of honesty. But now she felt as if she was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into the unknown. Everything she had believed about him was being ripped apart, piece by piece. Finally, Jason exhaled, his breath ragged. "You won't understand," he muttered, his words laced with a weariness that made her stomach churn. "I never wanted you to know, Emily. I thought it would be better if you didn't. I thought I could bury it. But I can't hide it anymore. You need to know the truth." Emily's pulse quickened, her heart pounding in her throat. This was it, the moment when the mask Jason had worn for so long would finally slip, revealing something she never could have imagined. The weight of that moment hung heavily in the air, the uncertainty pressing down on her chest like a physical force. "I don't care about your past, Jason. I just want to know what happened," Emily said, her voice firm now, despite the storm raging inside her. She needed answers. She needed to understand. If their life together was going to mean anything, she needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. Jason's expression faltered, and for the first time, Emily saw the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. The strong, confident man she had married seemed to shrink under the weight of his own secrets. He hesitated for a moment longer, then turned away from her, his back to her again, as if the sight of her made him ashamed. "This isn't something I've ever talked about, Emily," he said, his voice distant and hollow. "But I owe you the truth, I guess, and if this is going to make you walk away from me, then so be it." "Stop," Emily interjected, her breath catching. "Stop talking like that. Just tell me." Jason clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white, and after a long moment of silence, he spoke again. "I wasn't always the man you think I am. Before I met you, I was involved in things, dangerous things, things that I thought I had left behind." His voice was low and heavy with a mixture of regret and shame. "The scars on my back are from a time in my life that I've tried to forget, a time when I was part of something I should have never been." Emily's mind spun as she tried to piece together what he was saying. "What do you mean? What kind of things?" Jason paused, his shoulders rising and falling with each breath. When he finally spoke again, his voice was laced with pain. "I was part of an underground organization, one that operates in the shadows. I don't want to go into the details, but let's just say I wasn't always the man you think I am. I've done things, terrible things, things that changed me, things that left marks on me, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally." Emily's heart hammered in her chest. She had heard rumors, stories whispered in hushed tones about secretive organizations, about powerful men who operated outside the law. But she never, ever imagined Jason would be involved in anything like that. He had always seemed so clean, so pure. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking with a mix of confusion and hurt. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth?" "I was trying to protect you," Jason replied, his voice tinged with regret. "From everything. From the danger I left behind. I thought that if I just kept everything hidden, we could have a normal life. A life you deserved. A life without all this darkness." Emily took a step back, her mind racing. Jason's words cut deeper than she expected, and the weight of the secret he had carried for so long settled on her shoulders. Everything she thought she knew about him was now in question. Who was he, really? And who had she married? But the scars, those brutal, unforgiving marks on his back, told a story far darker than she could have ever imagined. The images of them danced in her mind like a haunting refrain, a cruel reminder of the man Jason had once been, and perhaps the man he still was. The air around them seemed to grow heavier as Emily stood in stunned silence. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to react. Was this the man she had fallen in love with? Or was this a stranger, someone hiding behind a carefully constructed mask? "Emily," Jason whispered, his voice filled with vulnerability. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to drag you into this world. But the truth is, I'm not the man I used to be. I left that life behind. I swear to you, I did. But the past, it never fully lets go. The scars are just a reminder." Emily's mind raced as she tried to process everything he was saying. But no matter how hard she tried, the feeling of betrayal gnawed at her from the inside out. How could she have not seen the signs? How could she have been so blind to the truth? But then something inside her shifted. As she looked at Jason, really looked at him, she saw the man she had fallen in love with. The man who had loved her with such intensity, who had given her everything, who had shared his life with her in ways that made her feel cherished and protected. Could she really let this one thing tear them apart? Could she throw away everything they had built because of something in his past? The silence between them deepened, filled with uncertainty. Jason's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw the vulnerability in them. He was a man who had made mistakes, who had scars, both visible and hidden. But he was also a man who had changed, or so he claimed. Emily didn't know if she could forgive him yet, but the weight of his honesty was undeniable. Can we talk about this?" Emily finally asked, her voice softer now, despite the confusion and pain still swirling in her chest. Jason nodded, his expression unreadable, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a desperate plea that she would listen. "I'll tell you everything, Emily," he said quietly. "Everything. But only if you're ready to hear it." And with that, the storm of emotions that had threatened to overwhelm her seemed to calm, at least for the moment. Emily didn't know where this conversation would lead, or if she could ever fully understand the darkness that Jason had lived through. But she knew one thing for certain. Their journey together had only just begun, whether they were ready for it or not. Shattered walls and fractured trust. The morning light filtering through the curtains seemed to mock Emily as she stood in the silence of their honeymoon suite. Jason had retreated to the far corner of the room, his gaze cast down, as if the weight of his own words had pressed him into submission. The once grand excitement of the day ahead, her wedding day, now seemed like a distant memory, a fleeting dream that had already begun to fade away. Her heart felt heavy, weighed down by 1,000 unanswered questions, and yet the most terrifying part was the uncertainty. Jason's confession had unraveled something deep inside her. The man she had married, the man she had trusted completely, was now a stranger. The man with the soft smile and gentle words had hidden a life so far removed from the one she knew. And now she was left in the ruins of that trust, trying to piece together the shards of their relationship, unsure of what would remain when the dust finally settled. Emily sat down on the edge of the bed, the luxurious silk sheets slipping beneath her as she pulled her knees up to her chest. Her mind raced, images of Jason's scars flashing before her eyes like an unsettling slideshow. How could she have missed the signs? How had he hidden this dark part of himself for so long? Jason moved towards the window, his back turned to her, and for a moment, the space between them felt like an ocean, vast and impassable. The anger inside Emily simmered, but it wasn't just anger. It was a mix of betrayal, confusion, and hurt. She had trusted him. She had believed in him with every ounce of her being. And now it felt like that trust had been shattered beyond repair. "How long?" she asked, her voice tight, as she watched him through the reflection in the glass. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress, the sharp edges of the fabric digging into her skin as if she could physically hold herself together. "How long were you involved in this world?" Jason's shoulders stiffened at the question, but he didn't turn around. "It was years ago. Before we met, Emily. I was involved for a few years. I left that life behind when I moved here, when I started my life with you. But the scars..." His voice broke slightly, and for the first time, he seemed vulnerable. "The scars don't just go away. They're not something you can erase." Emily swallowed, feeling as if the weight of his words was physically suffocating her. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand answers. But instead, she found herself frozen in place, the shock settling into her bones. How had she married someone who had lived a life so far removed from the image he had carefully crafted for her? How had she missed the signs? "How could you let me marry you, knowing this about yourself?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't the anger that had crept into her words. It was disbelief. She couldn't fathom how someone could hide such a monumental part of their life from the person they were supposed to love most in the world. Jason finally turned around, his face pale and drawn, the weight of his own guilt etched deep into every line of his features. His eyes met hers, dark, conflicted, and full of shame. He took a step forward but stopped, as if afraid of getting too close. "I didn't want to drag you into that world. It's dangerous, Emily. You don't understand. The people I was involved with, they don't let go easily. If they knew about you, they'd come after you. They'd hurt you." Emily blinked, her heart hammering in her chest. "So you kept this secret? And for what? To protect me? To protect yourself?" Her voice was shaky now, the sting of betrayal becoming too much to ignore. "You thought you could just keep this from me. You thought that I wouldn't care." Jason ran a hand through his hair, his gaze falling to the floor. "I was trying to protect you. I thought if you knew, it would ruin everything. I couldn't lose you, Emily. Not after everything we've been through. I love you too much to let this past, destroy us." The words, "I love you," felt empty now. They hung in the air between them, but Emily wasn't sure if they meant anything anymore. How could love be genuine if it was built on lies? How could she believe anything he said when he had hidden the darkest parts of himself, the parts that were clearly so intertwined with his identity? Her mind reeled, trying to process everything. The man she had stood beside just hours ago, her husband, the man who had kissed her gently beneath the soft glow of their wedding lights, was someone entirely different. She had given him her heart. She had trusted him. And yet, here he was, unraveling everything she thought she knew about him. "I don't know who you are anymore," Emily whispered, feeling the tears welling up behind her eyes. She quickly blinked them away, but the emotional tidal wave was impossible to stop. Jason's eyes softened, the regret in his gaze almost too much to bear. "I never wanted to hurt you, Emily. I didn't know how to tell you. The guilt has eaten at me every single day we've been together. But the last thing I wanted to do was lose you. I never meant for it to get this far." She shook her head, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "You should have told me the truth, Jason. From the beginning. I deserve that. We deserve that." Jason stood there, frozen, looking as though every word he had just said had come back to haunt him. He opened his mouth to speak again but hesitated. He knew nothing he could say would erase the hurt he had caused. Nothing could undo the years of deception, of hiding behind a mask of normalcy, while a darker world lay just beneath the surface. Emily stood up suddenly, her hands shaking as she moved across the room, away from him, needing space to breathe. The air felt thick now, suffocating. She had dreamed of this moment, the honeymoon suite, the first night as husband and wife. And now it was all tainted. Everything had been poisoned by the truth, by the revelation of Jason's past. She walked towards the door, every step feeling like a betrayal to the love they had shared. "I need some time, Jason. I need to think. I can't do this right now." Jason's face crumpled at the words, as if her declaration was the final blow to a life that had already been shattered. He opened his mouth to stop her, to beg her to stay, but no words came out. The silence between them was deafening. Emily reached for the door handle, the cold metal pressing against her palm. As she pulled it open, she glanced back at him one last time. "I don't know what to say to you right now. I need time." Without waiting for him to respond, she stepped out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where she was going or what she was looking for, but she couldn't stay there. Not yet. The hotel's hallway was quiet, the only sound the soft click of her heels against the marble floor. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, the weight of her emotions crashing over her in waves. She had thought she was walking into a fairy tale, a dream come true. But instead, she had stepped into a nightmare, one that she couldn't wake up from. Jason's truth had shattered her trust, and now there was nothing left to do but try to piece together what had once seemed so perfect. But even as she walked away, a small part of her wondered if it was already too late to salvage anything at all. She had no answers, no clear path forward, only a sense of dread that settled deep in her chest, and the fear that the love they once shared might never return. Unraveling the past, facing the future, Emily wandered through the hotel, her thoughts a storm of confusion and hurt. The grand lobby felt like a distant world compared to the chaotic whirlwind inside her heart. The elegance of the space, the crystal chandeliers, the polished marble floors, the soft hum of distant voices, seemed at odds with the raw turmoil inside her. She wasn't sure where she was going, only that she needed to be far away from the hotel room, away from Jason, and the haunting revelation of his past. As she passed through the expansive hallways, her footsteps echoing in the silence, she felt like a ghost, unseen, unnoticed, but aching from the weight of everything she had learned. The vibrant images of her wedding day, of Jason in his tuxedo, looking so confident and in love, felt like a dream now, a beautiful but ultimately false illusion. The man she had vowed to spend her life with, the man she had thought she knew better than anyone, had kept his most painful secrets buried in the darkest corners of his soul. But it wasn't just the lies that stung the most. It was the betrayal of trust, the sense that she had been deceived on the deepest level. How could he have looked into her eyes, smiled, and promised her forever, knowing the horrors of his past? How could he have stood before her in their wedding ceremony, exchanging vows of eternal love, with a past so violently different from the life they were supposed to build together? As Emily turned a corner and walked toward the hotel's terrace, the salty sea air hit her face, a brief respite from the suffocating emotions that clung to her like a second skin. The view from the terrace was breathtaking. Endless blue water stretching out to the horizon, the rhythmic waves crashing against the shore in a steady, calming pattern. It should have been peaceful, but the beauty of the scene only made her feel more alone. Alone in a world she no longer recognized. She stepped outside and leaned against the railing, closing her eyes for a moment, as if the air could somehow cleanse her. She let the cool breeze brush against her skin, the scent of the ocean mixing with the faint fragrance of her wedding bouquet, now a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The soft rustling of palm trees in the distance was the only sound that accompanied her in that moment of solitude. Her mind drifted back to the past few days, the engagement, the days leading up to their wedding. Everything had seemed perfect. Jason had been perfect. She had been swept off her feet by his charm, his quiet confidence, his unwavering devotion. But now, she realized that she had been looking at a carefully constructed facade, one built to hide a life filled with dark secrets. She had thought she knew him, thought they had built something real and lasting. But she was beginning to wonder if she had ever truly known the man standing in that hotel room, confessing the life he had kept from her. In her mind's eye, she saw him again, his face filled with anguish as he spoke of his past, his eyes dark with guilt. The scars on his back, the tattoos that seemed to hold some kind of cryptic meaning, had all been clues she hadn't seen. She wondered if she had been too blinded by her own idealism, too eager to see only the good in him, to notice the signs. But was it really her fault? Had she been too trusting, too naive? Or had Jason truly been the architect of his own deception, keeping her in the dark for his own reasons? The questions kept swirling, growing louder and more insistent with each passing minute. She wanted answers, but more than that, she wanted to know why. Why had Jason chosen her, someone so innocent to the world he had lived in? Was she just a way out for him, a way to escape the chains of his past? Had he truly loved her, or was he using her as a way to forget the horrors he had left behind? The more she thought about it, the more the answers seemed out of reach. Each question led to another, and with each new discovery about Jason's past, the distance between them grew. The trust they had once shared felt as if it had been taken away in an instant, swept away by the truth. She was still standing at the railing, looking out at the ocean, when she heard the soft click of a door opening behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Jason had followed her, no doubt trying to make amends, to explain the unexplainable. But Emily wasn't sure if any explanation could undo the damage. She had asked for space, but here he was, standing in the doorway, his eyes searching her face with a mixture of regret and longing. She could hear the unspoken plea in his silence, the desperate wish for reconciliation. "Emily," he began, his voice tentative, as if each word was a fragile thread. "Can we talk?" She didn't answer immediately, but kept her back to him. The wind blew through her hair, the strands whipping around her face, but it was a relief, an emotional shield, a way to block him out for just a moment longer. She wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. "Please," he continued, stepping closer, his voice now more urgent. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've betrayed your trust. But I swear to you, Emily, everything I did for you. For us. I didn't want you to get involved in my past. I didn't want to bring that world into your life. Emily closed her eyes, the sting of his words cutting deeper than she had imagined. She had spent so much time envisioning their future, building castles in the air, only to have them come crashing down around her. She had married him believing in the love they shared, believing that nothing could tear them apart. But now, everything felt uncertain. She didn't know where the truth ended, and the lies began. Turning slowly, she faced him for the first time since he had confessed, her eyes cold and distant. "How could you think you were protecting me by lying to me, Jason? How could you think I wouldn't understand?" Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to keep steady, not wanting to show him how much he had broken her. "You could have told me. You could have trusted me with your past, but you chose to hide it. And now I don't know who I'm standing in front of anymore." Jason flinched, his face going pale as if her words had physically struck him. "Emily, I never meant to hurt you. I thought." He stopped, his hands running through his hair in frustration. "I thought you wouldn't be able to love me if you knew what I'd done, the mistakes I'd made. I thought you'd leave, and I didn't want to lose you." Emily's chest tightened with the overwhelming weight of his confession. "So you thought lying to me was the answer? You thought I wouldn't understand. But the truth is, I don't know who you are anymore. The man I married is gone, Jason, and I don't know if I can ever get him back." The silence between them was suffocating. Jason opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came out. His eyes were full of remorse, full of the desperate hope that somehow she would understand, that somehow he could fix everything he had broken. But Emily wasn't sure if there was a way back. Not yet. She needed time. Time to process the truth, time to figure out if they could move forward, or if the damage was irreparable. "I can't talk about this anymore," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I need time to think, to breathe. Please, Jason, just leave me alone for a while." Jason hesitated, his body tensing as if he wanted to argue, to convince her to stay, to make things right. But instead, he simply nodded, his face a mixture of frustration and sorrow. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing on the terrace, alone with her thoughts, the crashing waves below a constant reminder that some things in life couldn't be undone. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emily stood there, watching the horizon. The future seemed uncertain, and the weight of the past pressed down on her shoulders. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had control over her own life. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: she would have to navigate it on her own. And that thought, in its own way, brought her a strange sense of peace. The fractured heart. Emily spent the next few days in a haze, her world spinning in a direction she hadn't expected. The hotel suite, once a sanctuary of romance and dreams for her wedding night, had transformed into a prison of her own making. The luxurious surroundings, the sound of the ocean lapping against the shore, the soft hum of life beyond her walls, none of it brought her comfort. She had become a stranger in her own skin, trapped in the aftermath of Jason's revelations. Her wedding dress, the symbol of the love and commitment she had once believed in, now hung limply on a chair in the corner of the room. She hadn't touched it since Jason had confessed, and the sight of it only reminded her of how foolish she had been to trust so blindly. Each passing hour felt like an eternity. She moved through the motions of the day with mechanical precision. When she ate, the food tasted bland. When she walked by the window and gazed out at the beach, the soft winds felt like daggers against her skin, each gust whispering a haunting reminder of everything she had lost. The clarity she had hoped for never came. She couldn't bring herself to make a decision, to choose a direction. She had asked for space, and Jason had respected that request. He had given her the time she needed, but she felt his absence like a weight. It wasn't that she missed him. It was that the silence left in his wake was unbearable. There was nothing more deafening than the sound of a love crumbling under the weight of betrayal. As the days went by, Emily felt as though she was caught between two worlds. There was the world she had known, the world of warmth, love, and promises, that now seemed impossibly distant. And then there was the world of truth, where Jason's secrets loomed large and inescapable. She had always been an idealist, someone who believed in the goodness of people, in the power of love to overcome any obstacle. But now, that faith felt naive. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew better than anyone, had shattered that belief with the cold, hard truth of his past. She had tried, in vain, to rationalize what he had told her. Jason had been part of a world of crime, a world filled with violence and regret. The tattoos, the scars, the stories he had kept hidden, they all painted a picture of a man who had fought to survive in a world where empathy was a weakness. But Emily couldn't ignore the questions that gnawed at her, questions that twisted her gut and made it impossible to move forward. How could she reconcile the man she had married with the man he had been? How could she possibly build a future with someone who had lived a life so diametrically opposed to everything she stood for? Her heart told her that she loved Jason, that the person he had become, the man she had stood beside at their wedding, was worth fighting for. But her mind screamed for her to run, to escape the emotional chaos that had begun to consume her. She didn't know who Jason truly was anymore. She didn't know if he was capable of changing, of becoming the man she had believed him to be. And more than that, she didn't know if she could ever truly trust him again. On the fourth day after Jason's confession, Emily found herself walking along the beach, her bare feet sinking into the soft sand. The ocean stretched out before her, a vast expanse of blue that seemed to go on forever. She wasn't sure where she was going, but the rhythmic crashing of the waves offered a sense of peace, a moment of clarity in a life that felt otherwise shattered. As she walked, she remembered the first time she had met Jason. It had been at a charity gala in New York, just 2 years ago. She had been standing near the entrance, adjusting her dress, when he had appeared beside her, a glass of champagne in hand. He had smiled at her in a way that made her heart skip a beat, as if he already knew everything about her. They had spent the evening together, talking about everything and nothing at all. Jason had been easy to talk to, his charm effortless. He had listened intently as she spoke about her career, about her dreams, and about her vision for the future. But it wasn't just his words that captivated her. It was the way he looked at her, as though he saw her for who she truly was, not just the surface-level exterior. They had danced under the stars that night, their connection growing with every passing moment. She had never felt more alive, more understood, than she did with him. When he kissed her that night, she had known, in that instant, that she was falling in love with him. But now, as she stood on the beach, that memory felt like a lifetime ago. The person she had fallen in love with, the man she had built her dreams around, felt like a stranger. The image of Jason, his face filled with guilt, his back scarred with the remnants of a life she couldn't understand, haunted her. She wondered if he had ever really been the man she thought he was, or if the man she had married had always been a facade, carefully constructed to hide the truth. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie. She turned, her heart racing, as she saw Jason approaching, his face drawn with exhaustion and concern. He had been following her for some time, she realized. He must have known that she was struggling, that she needed space, but also craved answers. "Emily," he said softly, stopping a few feet away. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I betrayed you, how I shattered your trust, and I want to make it right. I don't know if I can ever undo the pain I've caused, but I want to try. I want to show you who I really am, the man I've become. I don't want to lose you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. His voice, full of raw emotion, made her heart ache. It was the same voice that had once promised her a lifetime of love, the same voice that had whispered sweet nothings in her ear during their quiet moments together. But now it felt like a hollow echo of the man she had once known. "I don't know, Jason," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. You've kept so much from me, so many things that changed everything I thought I knew about you. You've told me about your past, but what if there's more? What if there are still things you haven't told me? Things I can't even begin to comprehend. Jason stepped forward, his eyes pleading with her. I swear, Emily, I've told you everything. The past is over, and I'm not that man anymore. But I need you to believe me. I need you to see the man I've become, the man I want to be with you. The sincerity in his eyes, the desperate need for her to understand, tugged at her heart. But Emily had learned, in those few short days, that words were no longer enough. She needed more than promises. She needed time, time to think, time to heal, time to figure out if love was enough to overcome betrayal. I can't give you that right now, Jason, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. I need space. I need to find myself again before I can decide what to do next. I don't know if we can go back to what we had, but I need to figure that out on my own. Jason nodded, his face falling, the weight of her words settling on him like a heavy burden. I understand, he said quietly, his shoulders slumping. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily alone once again with her thoughts. The wind picked up, the waves crashing more forcefully against the shore. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, and Emily felt as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure of which way to turn. Her heart was fractured, torn between love and pain, trust and doubt. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Emily would have to face her demons, and Jason's, before she could ever truly move forward. The unraveling. Weeks passed, and Emily's world continued to spin, caught in an unrelenting cycle of confusion, sorrow, and quiet introspection. She had returned to her apartment in New York, away from the beach where she had hoped to find clarity, only to be faced with the overwhelming weight of her feelings. The walls of her apartment, which had once been a sanctuary filled with light and love, now felt cold, closing in on her. Her thoughts were like a storm, ever-changing, never still, and she couldn't seem to escape the feeling of being lost in her own mind. Jason had kept his distance, respecting her request for space. He hadn't called or messaged her too often, only sending the occasional text, letting her know he was there when she was ready to talk. Yet the silence between them spoke louder than words ever could. It echoed through her home, reminding her of everything she had to face, everything she had to reconsider. Emily often found herself staring out of her apartment's large windows, gazing at the bustling city below. The world seemed so alive, so vibrant, while she felt stuck in a place of stasis. New York was full of energy, of movement, and yet she felt paralyzed. Her past and present collided in ways she wasn't ready to confront. The life she had built with Jason felt like a fragile bubble, easily pierced by the harshness of the truth. She wondered if she could ever fully trust him again, or if the shadows of his past would forever haunt them. It wasn't just Jason's secrets that disturbed her. It was her own feelings of betrayal. She had given him everything, her heart, her trust, her future, and yet it felt as though he had taken it all and built something false in its place. What she had thought was real, what she had believed to be true, now felt like an illusion. And what hurt more than anything was that she had let herself be deceived, had let herself fall for a man whose past was far darker than she had ever imagined. She had tried to distract herself, throwing herself into work, staying late at the office, attending social events, anything to keep her mind from wandering back to Jason. But there was no escaping the gnawing ache in her chest. No matter how hard she tried, she kept thinking of him, of their time together, of the man he had been and the man he had confessed to be. She thought of the scar on his back, a physical reminder of his past life, and with it came a question that she couldn't shake. Was Jason capable of change? Could someone truly leave their past behind, or did it always find a way to resurface? Emily had never been one to believe in second chances. She was a woman of principle, someone who valued honesty and integrity above all else. But there was a part of her, a fragile, vulnerable part that wanted to believe in the possibility of redemption. She had seen the remorse in Jason's eyes, the sincerity in his words. But could that really be enough? Could she trust him again, or was she setting herself up for even more heartache? One evening, after another long day at the office, Emily returned home to find a letter waiting for her. The envelope was simple, with no return address, but as soon as she picked it up, she knew it was from Jason. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, his careful script, each letter formed with precision and care. She hesitated for a moment before tearing it open, not knowing what to expect. Emily, I know that you need time. I understand that you are torn, confused, and unsure about everything. But I need you to know that I am not the man I was. I am not the man who hurt people, who betrayed others, who made mistakes that scarred my soul. I am the man who loves you, the man who wants to build a life with you. I know that I don't deserve your trust, but I'm asking for it anyway, because without you, I am nothing. Please, if you can, find it in your heart to give me another chance. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I am worthy of your love. Yours always, Jason. The letter was both a plea and a promise, and as Emily read through it, she felt her heart tremble. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm the storm of emotions that had flared up inside her. She had longed for this moment, for Jason to finally say what she needed to hear, but now that it was here, it didn't feel like the resolution she had hoped for. It only left her feeling more uncertain than ever before. In the days that followed, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the letter. She read it over and over again, each time trying to decipher the meaning behind his words. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But the weight of his past, of the things he had done before they had met, still lingered in her mind like an unshakable shadow. No matter how much she loved him, she couldn't ignore the reality of his past life. It was a part of him that she couldn't erase, no matter how hard she tried. Finally, Emily decided to confront him. She needed to see him, to hear him speak face to face, and to make a decision once and for all. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that she couldn't live in this limbo any longer. She needed answers, and she needed closure one way or another. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in the city, a place that had once been their favorite spot for casual dates and late-night conversations. As Emily walked into the cafe, her heart pounded in her chest. She spotted Jason sitting at a corner table, his back to her, the familiar broad shoulders that she had once felt so safe leaning against. He had been waiting for her, just as he always did, patient and hopeful. When he turned to face her, she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. He looked older somehow, as if the weight of everything he had confessed to her had aged him beyond his years. But even so, his gaze was warm, filled with the same affection that had drawn her to him in the first place. "Emily," Jason said softly, his voice full of uncertainty. "Thank you for meeting me. I know this is hard for you, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope that one day I can earn your trust again." Emily sat down across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't know, Jason," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. The man I thought I knew is not the man you are. And I don't know if I can reconcile the man you were with the man I want to spend my life with." Jason's expression faltered, but he didn't look away. "I understand. I've done things that I regret, things that I can never undo. But I want you to know that I am not that person anymore. I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused you. I'm sorry for not being honest from the start. But please, Emily, let me prove that I can be the man you need me to be." She studied him for a moment, the silence between them growing thick with tension. She could feel the ache in her chest, the conflicting pull of love and doubt. Jason had hurt her, but he was also the man she had dreamed of spending her life with. And now, she was left standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. "Maybe," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "maybe we can start over. But I can't promise you anything. I need time to think, to figure out if I can let go of the past and move forward." Jason nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "I'll wait for you, Emily. As long as it takes." And in that moment, Emily realized that the journey she was about to take wasn't just about Jason. It was about her too. It was about finding the strength to heal, to trust again, and to decide if love, in all its complexities, was enough to overcome the scars of the past. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Emily had to take it one step at a time. And in that moment, for the first time in weeks, she felt the smallest flicker of hope stir inside her heart.